Jamin stepped off the spacecraft and onto the soil of Zerith 7, his heart pounding with a mix of excitement and unease. The air smelled strange but not unpleasant, like a blend of wet earth and something metallic. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself as he looked around at the alien landscape. Towering trees with glowing leaves stretched toward the sky, their colors shifting from soft blues to vibrant purples. Strange creatures flitted between the branches, some chirping softly while others made clicking noises that echoed faintly in the distance. This was supposed to be an adventure, one of exploration and discovery. The humans had been chosen carefully for this intergalactic exchange program, sent to learn about the Zerithians, a species known for their advanced technology and unique culture. But standing there now, surrounded by towering insectoid beings whose exoskeletons shimmered under the light of twin suns, Jamin couldn't help but feel small and out of place. The Zerithians were nothing like what Jamin had imagined. It stood nearly twice as tall as humans, their bodies covered in smooth, reflective plates that shifted hues depending on the angle of the light. Their large, multifaceted eyes scanned everything with clinical precision, and their mandibles clicked rhythmically as they communicated among themselves. Despite their intimidating appearance, they seemed curious rather than hostile, studying the humans with detached interest. For days after their arrival, Jamin followed the group's routine, attending briefings, participating in cultural exchanges, and helping set up temporary shelters near the edge of a vast forest. Yet no matter how hard he tried to focus on the tasks at hand, his mind kept wandering to the wilderness beyond the settlement. There was something alluring about the dense woods, something mysterious that called to him every time he glanced in its direction. One morning, unable to resist the pull any longer, Jamin slipped away from the group during a break. He told himself he'd only go a little way in to see what lay just beyond the tree line. As he entered the forest, the temperature dropped slightly, and the ground beneath his feet became softer, almost spongy. The air grew thicker, carrying the scent of damp bark and something sweet yet unfamiliar. He wandered deeper, marveling at the sights around him. Bioluminescent plants dotted the forest floor, casting a gentle glow that illuminated his path. Tiny winged creatures darted past him, leaving trails of sparkling dust in their wake. For the first time since arriving on Zerith 7, Jamin felt truly alive, as if the weight of being so far from home had lifted, even if just for a moment. But then, disaster struck. Without warning, the ground beneath him gave way, and Jamin found himself sinking into a patch of moss that felt more like quicksand than solid earth. Panic surged through him as he struggled to free himself, but the more he moved, the deeper he sank. His heart raced as he realized he might be stuck here, alone and helpless. Just when despair began to creep in, a figure emerged from behind a nearby tree. It was a Zerithian, though unlike any Jamin had seen before. Her exoskeleton glowed faintly blue, contrasting sharply with the golden tones of her peers. Her movements were graceful, almost hesitant. As she approached him, she didn't speak or make a sound. Instead, she extended her long, clawed limbs and reached down to grab him. With surprising strength, she pulled Jamin free from the mossy trap and set him gently on firmer ground. He stared up at her, his chest heaving as he caught his breath. Up close, he could see the intricate patterns etched into her exoskeleton, swirling designs that seemed to pulse faintly with light. Her large eyes regarded him with an intensity that made him feel both exposed and oddly safe. "Thank you," Jamin managed to say, though he doubted she understood human speech. Still, he smiled weakly, hoping the gesture conveyed his gratitude. Zerithian tilted her head slightly, her antennae twitching as if processing his words, or perhaps sensing his emotions. Then, without another sound, she turned and disappeared back into the forest, leaving Jamin alone once more. That night, as he lay in his sleeping quarters, Jamin couldn't stop thinking about the mysterious Zerithian who had saved him. He replayed the encounter over and over in his mind, wondering why she had helped him and why she seemed so different from the others. Little did he know, she was thinking about him too. Mira, as she was called, returned to her nest high in the treetops, her thoughts consumed by the human she had rescued. From the moment she saw him struggling in the moss, something inside her stirred a feeling she hadn't experienced in years. Humans were strange creatures, fragile yet resilient, and there was something about Jamin that intrigued her. Perhaps it was the way his eyes widened in fear when he thought he was trapped, or the genuine smile he gave her afterward. Whatever it was, Mira knew one thing for certain. She wanted him to belong to her. In Zerithian culture, marking someone with your scent was a sacred act, reserved for claiming a mate or forming a lifelong bond. It wasn't done lightly, nor was it common for such a bond to form across species. But Mira didn't care about tradition or rules. All she cared about was ensuring that no other Zerithian female would dare approach J-Min. Under the cover of darkness, Mira crept back to the human settlement. She moved silently, her glowing exoskeleton dimmed to avoid detection. When she found Jamin sleeping peacefully in his tent, she hesitated for only a moment before stepping closer. Carefully, she rubbed her pheromone-laden secretions onto his skin, marking him as hers. To anyone else, the act might have seemed possessive or even cruel, but to Mira, It was an expression of devotion or promise to protect him from harm. When she finished, she lingered for a moment, watching him sleep. A sense of satisfaction washed over her, knowing that her scent would warn other females to stay away. This human belonged to her now, and she would do whatever it took to keep him safe. Unaware of what had transpired, Jamin woke the next morning feeling unusually content. He didn't notice the faint aroma clinging to his skin, or the subtle change in how the Zarathians treated him. For now, he simply went about his day, eager to explore more of the planet, and maybe, just maybe, catch another glimpse of the enigmatic Zarithian who had saved him. The days that followed Jamin's encounter with the glowing Zarithian were strange. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was different, though he couldn't quite put his finger on it. At first he thought it was just the lingering excitement of meeting someone so unique, but soon, subtle signs began to appear. The other Zarithians treated him differently. Now some avoided him altogether, while others seemed to glare at him with an intensity that made him uneasy. It started with small things. During meals in the communal area, a group of Zarithian females would whisper among themselves as they watched him eat. Their clicking mandibles and flickering antennae suggested disapproval, though Jamin had no idea what he'd done wrong. Other times, when he walked through the settlement, he noticed females stepping back or turning away as if his presence offended them. Even some of the humans began giving him odd looks, though none dared ask him directly what was going on. J-Min tried to ignore it, focusing instead on his daily tasks and the beauty of the planet around him. But curiosity gnawed at him. Why were the Zarithians acting this way? Had he accidentally broken some unspoken rule? The questions plagued him until one evening, when Mira appeared again. She came to him during sunset, her glowing exoskeleton shimmering softly in the fading light. Jamin had been sitting by himself near the edge of the forest, sketching the strange plants and creatures he'd seen earlier that day. When he looked up and saw her approaching, his heart skipped a beat. There was something comforting about her presence. Even though she rarely spoke, Mira didn't say anything at first. She simply stood beside him, her large eyes scanning the horizon, as if taking in the view. Then, without warning, she reached out and touched his shoulder lightly with one of her clawed limbs. Jamin flinched slightly, but relaxed almost immediately. Her touch was surprisingly gentle, far less intimidating than her appearance might suggest. "Are you okay?" Jamin asked hesitantly, unsure if she understood him. "Everyone's been weird lately." Mira tilted her head slightly, her antennae twitching as if processing his words. Though she didn't respond verbally, her body language seemed to convey understanding. She hummed softly, a low soothing sound that reminded Jamin of distant thunder. It was calming, almost hypnotic. Over the next few days, Mira began visiting him regularly. Each time, she brought something new: a strange fruit with translucent skin, a handful of glowing crystals, or even a small creature that looked like a cross between a bird and an insect. Through gestures and trial and error communication, she taught him how to use these items. She showed him which fruits were safe to eat, how to climb the towering trees to collect sap, and where to find hidden caves filled with sparkling gemstones. Jamin found himself eagerly anticipating her visits. Despite their differences, there was a connection between them that felt natural, almost instinctive. He admired her strength and grace, while she seemed fascinated by his curiosity and willingness to learn. They spent hours together exploring the forest, discovering new wonders and sharing quiet moments beneath the twin moons. But as their bond grew stronger, Jamin remained oblivious to the full implications of being marked. He didn't realize that Mira's actions carried deep significance in Zarithian culture. To her, rubbing her scent onto him had been an act of claiming, not just physically, but emotionally. By marking him, she had declared him hers, a decision that challenged centuries of tradition. Meanwhile, tensions within the Zarithian community continued to rise. Kayla, a high-ranking female known for her sharp intellect and fierce ambition, grew increasingly agitated by Mira's behavior. In Zarithian society, choosing a mate or forming any kind of lifelong bond was a serious matter, governed by strict rules and rituals. Claiming a human male was unheard of, and Kayla saw Mira's actions as a direct challenge to her authority. Kayla wasn't just any Zarithian. She was part of the ruling council, a position she had earned through years of service and cunning. Tall and imposing, with an exoskeleton that gleamed silver under the light, she commanded respect and fear from those around her. Her antennae were always raised high, a sign of dominance, and her piercing gaze could silence even the most outspoken individuals. 2. Kayla Mira's defiance was unacceptable. Not only had she disrupted the delicate balance of power within the community, but she had also drawn unwanted attention to the humans. If left unchecked, Kayla feared that Mira's actions could lead to chaos, undermining the very foundation of Zarithian society. Determined to restore order, Kayla gathered a group of loyal followers and began plotting ways to separate Jamin from Mira. She knew that confronting Mira directly would be risky. The glowing Zarithian was unusually strong and fiercely protective of her chosen mate. Instead, Kayla decided to strike when Mira least expected it, targeting Jamin directly in the hope of driving a wedge between them. One afternoon, While Jamin was helping repair a damaged fence near the edge of the settlement, Kayla made her move. She approached him casually, her movements smooth and deliberate. At first, Jamin thought nothing of it. He assumed she was simply curious about the work he was doing. But then, without warning, she lashed out, her sharp claws grazing his arm. Pain shot through Jamin as he stumbled backward, clutching the wound. Blood seeped through his fingers, staining the fabric of his sleeve. He stared at Kayla in shock, unable to comprehend why she had attacked him. Her expression was cold, almost indifferent, as if she viewed him as little more than an obstacle to be removed. Before Kayla could strike again, a loud hum filled the air. Mira burst onto the scene, her normally calm demeanor replaced by raw fury. Her glowing exoskeleton pulsed brighter than ever as she positioned herself between Jamin and Kayla, her claws extended and ready to fight. For a moment, the two females locked eyes, their antennae twitching furiously. The tension was palpable, thick enough to cut with a knife. Then, without warning, Kayla lunged forward, her movements swift and precise. Mira countered with equal speed, their limbs clashing in a blur of motion. The battle was brutal, each strike calculated and deadly. Chunks of exoskeleton flew off in sparks, and the ground trembled beneath their feet. Jamin watched in horror, unsure of what to do. He wanted to help Mira, but he was no match for either of them. All he could do was shout, his voice trembling with fear and anger. "Stop, please, stop." His cries went unanswered as the fight raged on. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Mira delivered a decisive blow, sending Kayla crashing to the ground. For a moment, everything was still, the only sound, heavy breathing of the combatants. Then, with a final glare, Kayla retreated, disappearing into the shadows of the forest. Though victorious, Mira was visibly shaken. She turned to Jamin, her glowing form dimming slightly as she examined his injury. Her antennae drooped slightly, a sign of concern. With great care, she used her claws to gently clean the wound before applying a sticky substance from a nearby plant. It stung at first, but the pain quickly subsided, replaced by a cooling sensation. Jamin looked up at her, gratitude and confusion swirling in his eyes. "Why did she attack me?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Mira didn't answer, not in words anyway. Instead, she placed a clawed hand on his shoulder and hummed softly, the same soothing sound she had made during their earlier encounters. It was as if she was telling him not to worry, that she would protect him no matter what. As night fell, Jamin sat by the fire, replaying the events of the day in his mind. He couldn't understand why Kayla hated him so much, or why Mira had risked her life to defend him. But one thing was clear, he owed her his life. Whatever bond they shared, it was real and stronger than he had realized. Unbeknownst to Kayla wasn't finished. Defeated but not deterred, she vowed to find another way to break the connection between him and Mira. For now, however, the two of them remained safe, their bond growing stronger with each passing day. Under the watchful eyes of the twin moons, Jamin leaned against Mira, feeling the warmth of her presence and the steady rhythm of her humming. Together, they faced the unknown, ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. The days following Kayla's attack were tense. The air in the settlement felt heavy, charged with an unspoken hostility that made Jamin uneasy. He tried to go about his routine, helping with repairs, attending meetings, and exploring the forest, but it was impossible to ignore the growing tension. The Xerithian females who had once avoided him now glared openly, their clicking mandibles sharp and deliberate. Even some of the humans began treating him differently, whispering behind his back when they thought he wasn't listening. J-Min didn't understand why this was happening. All he knew was that Mira had saved him from Kayla, risking her own safety to protect him. But the more time passed, the clearer it became that Kayla wasn't going to let things end there. She was planning something big, and Jamin could feel the weight of her anger pressing down on him like a storm cloud waiting to burst. Ra too seemed restless. She visited him less frequently now, though her absence wasn't because she didn't care. On the contrary, Jamin often caught glimpses of her watching over him from afar, her glowing exoskeleton dimmed to blend into the shadows. She stayed close enough to intervene if needed, but far enough to avoid drawing attention. It was as if she was trying to shield him from whatever trouble was brewing, even if it meant sacrificing her own comfort. One evening, as Jamin sat by the fire-eating dinner, one of the other humans, Hyenwu, a wiry man with a knack for fixing broken equipment, sat down beside him. Hyenwu glanced around cautiously before leaning in closer. "You should be careful," he said in a low voice. "People are talking." "About what?" Jamin asked. Though he already suspected the answer, Hyenwu hesitated, then shrugged. "You've been marked?" "Marked? What does that mean?" Hyenwu looked uncomfortable, shifting uneasily in his seat. "It's complicated. The Xerithians have this thing where they rub their scent on someone to claim them, like ownership. Everyone knows you belong to Mira now." Jamin froze, his food forgotten. Marked, ownership. The words hit him like a punch to the gut. He thought back to the strange behavior of the Xerithians, the way they treated him differently after his encounter with Mira. Was that why Kayla attacked him? Because she saw him as a threat to her authority, or worse, as some kind of insult to their traditions? Before Jaemin could respond, Hyenwoo stood up abruptly. Just watch your back, okay? Things are getting dangerous, dangerous. That word echoed in Jaemin's mind, long after Hyenwoo left. Dangerous wasn't just a feeling anymore, it was reality. And yet, despite the fear gnawing at him, Jaemin couldn't bring himself to resent Mira for what she had done. If anything, knowing that she had claimed him out of loyalty and protection only deepened his gratitude toward her. Still, he couldn't shake the sense that trouble was coming in soon. Kayla wasted no time putting her plans into motion. A few days later, news spread through the settlement about an upcoming festival celebrating the convergence of the twin moons. Humans and Xerithians alike prepared for the event, decorating the central arena with glowing crystals and colorful banners. Music filled the air, and the atmosphere buzzed with excitement. To Jaemin, however, the festival felt like a trap. He wanted to stay away, to avoid drawing any more attention to himself, but Mira insisted he attend. Through gestures and hums, she conveyed that staying hidden would only make things worse. Reluctantly, Jaemin agreed, hoping that blending in with the crowd might keep him safe. The night of the festival arrived, and the arena was alive with activity. Humans mingled with Xerithians, exchanging stories and sharing laughter under the light of the twin moons. The glowing crystals cast shimmering patterns across the ground, creating an almost magical ambience. For a brief moment, Jaemin allowed himself to relax, letting the beauty of the scene distract him from his worries. But then, disaster struck. As Jaemin wandered through the crowd, marveling at the intricate displays, he felt a sharp pain in his side. He cried out and stumbled forward, clutching his ribs. When he turned to see who or what had attacked him, he found Kayla standing there, her claws dripping with venom. Her expression was cold and calculating, her antennae raised high in triumph. Before Jaemin could react, Mira appeared seemingly out of nowhere. Her arrival was sudden and explosive, her glowing exoskeleton blazing brightly as she stepped between him and Kayla. The tension in the air was electric, crackling with barely contained rage. "You dare touch what is mine." Mira's voice was low and guttural, her mandibles clicking sharply. Though Jaemin couldn't understand her words directly, the meaning was clear. Kayla responded with a sneer, her body language aggressive. "Your actions defy our laws. This human is not yours to claim." Without another word, the two females lunged at each other, their movements fast and brutal. Claws clashed, exoskeletons cracked, and the ground shook beneath their feet. The surrounding crowd scattered, leaving Jaemin alone in the middle of the chaos. He watched in horror as Mira and Kayla fought, each strike more violent than the last. At one point, Kayla gained the upper hand, pinning Mira to the ground with her superior strength. Jaemin's heart sank as he realized his protector might lose. Desperation surged through him, overriding his fear. Without thinking, he stepped forward, shouting at the top of his lungs, "Stop! Leave her alone." His voice echoed across the arena, cutting through the noise of the battle. Both Kayla and Mira paused, turning their heads to look at him. The humans who had fled earlier began returning, drawn by the commotion. Even the Xerithians stopped to stare, their antennae twitching in surprise. No human had ever dared interfere in a Xerithian conflict before. Encouraged by Jaemin's bravery, Mira broke free from Keela's grip and delivered a powerful blow, sending her rival stumbling backward. Keela's followers rushed to her aid, but Mira stood tall, her glowing form radiating defiance. For a moment, it seemed as though the fight might escalate further. Then, unexpectedly, Kayla retreated. With a final glare at Jaemin and Mira, she turned and disappeared into the shadows, her followers trailing behind her. The crowd slowly dispersed, leaving Jaemin and Mira alone in the aftermath. Mira approached Jaemin cautiously, her antennae drooping slightly as she examined him for injuries. Her hum was soft and soothing, a stark contrast to the ferocity she had shown moments earlier. Jaemin reached out tentatively, placing a hand on her arm. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice trembling with emotion. "I don't know what I'd do without you." Though she didn't respond verbally, Mira's glowing exoskeleton pulsed gently, as if acknowledging his gratitude. For a moment, everything else faded away: the danger, the tension, the fear. All that mattered was the bond they shared, forged through trust and mutual protection. Later that night, as Jaemin and Mira rested near the edge of the forest, they both knew the fight wasn't truly over. Kayla wouldn't give up so easily, and her followers would continue to pose a threat. Staying in the settlement was no longer an option. Not if they wanted to survive. Mira communicated her plan through gestures and hums. They would leave the settlement and journey into the wilderness, seeking refuge in the uncharted regions of Xerith 7. It was a risky decision, but staying put was even riskier. Jaemin nodded in agreement, trusting Mira completely. As they prepared to depart, Jaemin took one last look at the settlement. The glowing lights of the festival still twinkled in the distance, a reminder of the life he was leaving behind. But he didn't feel sadness or regret. Instead, he felt hope. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he would face them alongside me. Under the light of the twin moons, they set off into the unknown, ready to carve out a new path together. The journey into the wilderness was harder than Jaemin had imagined. The dense forest that had once seemed magical and inviting now felt like a maze of dangers at every turn. The towering trees blocked out most of the sunlight, leaving the ground covered in shadow. Strange sounds echoed through the air, chirps, clicks, and low growls that made Jamin's skin crawl. Every step felt uncertain, as if the forest itself was testing their resolve. Mira led the way, her glowing exoskeleton casting just enough light to guide them through the darkness. She moved with purpose, her long limbs navigating the uneven terrain with ease. Jamin followed closely behind, doing his best to keep up despite his shorter legs and lack of familiarity with the environment. His muscles ached from the constant climbing and scrambling over roots and rocks, but he didn't complain. He knew they couldn't afford to slow down, not with Kayla and her followers likely hunting them, as they traveled deeper into the forest. The temperature dropped sharply. The air grew colder and damper, making it difficult for Jamin to stay warm. His thin jacket offered little protection against the biting chill, and his hands were red and raw from gripping branches and vines. Mira noticed his discomfort and stopped occasionally to gather materials for makeshift tools or shelter. Once she used her claws to carve a sturdy walking stick for him, which helped him steady himself on slippery slopes. Another time, she found a patch of soft moss and fashioned it into a crude blanket to wrap around his shoulders. Despite the challenges, Jamin found moments of beauty in their surroundings. Bioluminescent plants lit up the forest floor like tiny stars, and streams of crystal-clear water sparkled under the faint moonlight filtering through the canopy. During one brief rest, Mira showed him how to collect sap from a tree whose bark glowed faintly blue when applied to small cuts and scrapes. The sticky substance acted as a natural antiseptic, soothing the sting almost instantly. These lessons gave Jamin a sense of purpose, reminding him that survival wasn't just about enduring hardship, it was also about learning to adapt. But the dangers of the wilderness were ever present. On their third day of travel, they encountered a pack of predatory creatures resembling oversized lizards with razor-sharp teeth and glowing red eyes. The beasts emerged silently from the shadows, surrounding them in a matter of seconds. Jamin froze, his heart pounding as he realized there was nowhere to run. Mira, however, remained calm. Her antennae twitched furiously as she assessed the situation, her claws extended and ready to fight. The largest lizard lunged first, its jaws snapping mere inches from Jamin's face. Before it could strike again, Mira intercepted, slashing at the creature with incredible speed and precision. Her movements were fluid and calculated, each strike aimed at vulnerable spots beneath its armored scales. Inspired by her bravery, Jamin grabbed a fallen branch and swung it wildly at another lizard trying to flank them. Though his aim was clumsy, the improvised weapon managed to deter the beast long enough for Mira to finish off the leader. With their alpha defeated, the remaining lizards retreated into the shadows, leaving Jamin and Mira shaken but alive. As Jamin leaned against a tree, catching his breath, he marveled at Mira's strength and skill. She had fought without hesitation, putting herself in harm's way to protect him. He owed her more than he could ever repay. Their supplies dwindled. Quickly after the attack, food became scarce, and fresh water was harder to find. Jamin's stomach growled constantly, and his energy levels plummeted. Still, they pressed onward, driven by the knowledge that stopping meant risking capture or worse. One evening, as they huddled together near a bubbling stream, Jamin finally worked up the courage to ask the question that had been weighing on his mind. "Why did you choose me?" he asked softly, his voice barely audible over the sound of rushing water. Myra tilted her head slightly, her antennae twitching as if processing his words. For a moment, she didn't respond. Then, with a gentle hum, she reached out and touched his shoulder lightly with one of her clawed limbs. Her touch was warm and reassuring, filled with a depth of emotion that transcended language. Jamin waited patiently, knowing she would answer in her own way. After a pause, Mira began gesturing toward the sky, pointing at the twin moons hanging low above the horizon. Her movements were deliberate, almost ritualistic, as if telling a story. She mimicked the chirping of birds and the clicking of insects, recreating the sounds of the forest around them. Finally, she placed a hand over her chest, then pointed at J-Min. It took him a moment to understand what she was trying to say, but when he did, tears welled up in his eyes. Mira had chosen him because he reminded her of something precious, a connection to a world full of wonder and life. Perhaps it was his curiosity, his willingness to explore and learn, or simply the kindness he had shown during their encounters. Whatever the reason, Jamin realized that her bond with him wasn't just about possession or ownership. It was about preserving a piece of warmth in a cold and often harsh universe. That night, as they rested beside the stream, Jamin felt a renewed sense of determination. He wouldn't let Mira down, not after everything she had done for him. Together, they would survive, no matter what obstacles lay ahead. The next morning brought new challenges. A sudden storm rolled in, drenching the forest in sheets of rain that turned the ground into mud. Visibility dropped to almost zero, forcing them to rely entirely on Mira's glowing exoskeleton to navigate. The rain soaked through Jamin's clothes, chilling him to the bone, and the slick terrain made every step treacherous. At one point, he slipped and tumbled down a steep slope, landing hard on a bed of sharp rocks. Pain shot through his leg, and he cried out, clutching his knee, but Mira scrambled down to him immediately, her concern evident in the frantic twitching of her antennae. She examined his injury carefully, her claws probing gently to assess the damage. Though Jamin winced at the pain, he trusted her completely. Using strips of bark and fibrous plant material, she fashioned a makeshift splint to stabilize his leg. Then, with surprising gentleness, she helped him to his feet and supported him as they continued their journey. By the time the storm passed, Jamin's strength was nearly gone. Exhaustion weighed heavily on him, and his injured leg throbbed with every step. But just when it seemed like they couldn't go any further, they stumbled upon a hidden cave nestled deep within the forest. The entrance was partially obscured by vines and moss, but inside, the space was surprisingly dry and spacious. Mira led Jamin to a corner of the cave and settled him down, covering him with the moss blanket she had made earlier. For the first time in days, they allowed themselves a moment of rest. Jamin leaned back against the cool stone wall, closing his eyes as fatigue washed over him. Mira stayed close, humming softly to keep him calm. The sound was soothing, lulling him into a state of half-sleep. In that moment, surrounded by the quiet rhythm of her presence, Jamin felt safe, truly safe for the first time since leaving the settlement. Their peace was short-lived. Late that night, as Jamin drifted in and out of sleep, he heard faint noises coming from outside the cave. At first he thought it was just the wind rustling through the trees, but the sounds grew louder and more distinct, clicks and hums that sent shivers down his spine. Mira tensed beside him, her antennae standing upright as she listened intently. Kayla and her followers had found them. Without hesitation, Mira sprang into action. She positioned herself between Jamin and the entrance, her claws raised and ready to fight. Her glowing exoskeleton dimmed slightly, blending into the shadows as she prepared to ambush their attackers. Jamin struggled to stand, determined to help in any way he could, but his injured leg refused to cooperate. All he could do was watch as the battle unfolded. Kayla entered the cave first, her silver exoskeleton gleaming even in the dim light. Behind her, several other Zerithians fanned out, blocking any possible escape routes. Their expressions were cold and ruthless, their intentions clear. They weren't here to negotiate, they were here to eliminate the threat Mira posed. Fight that followed was brutal. Claws clashed, bodies collided, and the narrow confines of the cave amplified every sound. Mira fought with unmatched ferocity, her movements swift and precise. Despite being outnumbered, she held her ground, refusing to let Kayla get anywhere near Jamin. Each blow she delivered was met with equal force, the cave walls trembling under the impact. Jamin watched in horror, helpless to intervene. He wanted to scream, to shout for them to stop, but his voice caught in his throat. Instead, he gripped a jagged rock in his hand, ready to throw it at anyone who dared approach. His heart raced as he realized how dire the situation was. If Mira fell, so would he. Just when all hope seemed lost, reinforcements arrived unexpectedly. A group of humans and sympathetic Zerithians burst into the cave, armed with tools and weapons crafted from scavenged materials. They had heard rumors of Kayla's campaign against Jamin and Mira and had come to offer their support. Together, they drove Kayla and her followers back, forcing them to retreat into the darkness. When the dust settled, Jamin collapsed onto the ground, overwhelmed by relief and exhaustion. Mira knelt beside him, her glowing form flickering weakly. As she checked him for injuries, though battered and bruised, they were both alive and they had allies now. Under the faint glow of the twin moons filtering through the cave entrance, Jamin looked around at the faces of those who had come to their aid. Humans and Zerithians stood side by side, united by a shared desire for change. For the first time, he felt a glimmer of hope, not just for himself and Mira, but for the future of their two species. They weren't alone anymore. The aftermath of the battle left Jamin and Mira physically drained but emotionally fortified. The cave, once a temporary refuge, now buzzed with activity as their newfound allies worked to fortify its defenses. Humans and Zerithians moved in harmony, their differences fading into the background as they focused on a common goal: survival. For Jamin, it was a surreal sight seeing his own species and the towering insectoid beings collaborating so seamlessly. It gave him hope that perhaps the barriers between them weren't as insurmountable as they seemed. Mira, though weakened from the fight, remained vigilant. She stayed close to Jamin, her glowing exoskeleton dimmed but still radiant enough to cast soft light across the space. Her antennae twitched constantly, scanning for any sign of danger. Though she rarely spoke, her actions conveyed her gratitude toward those who had come to their aid. She hummed softly, a gesture of acknowledgement whenever someone passed by or offered help. To Jamin, her quiet strength was more reassuring than words could ever be. As the group settled into the cave, discussions began about what to do next. Some suggested returning to the settlement, believing that confronting Kayla directly was the only way to end the conflict. Others argued that staying hidden was safer, at least until they could gather more allies. The debate went on late into the night, voices rising and falling like waves. Jamin listened quietly, weighing the options in his mind. He knew that whatever decision they made would shape not just his future, but the future of everyone involved. Finally, One of the sympathetic Zerithians, a male named Taro, whose golden exoskeleton gleamed faintly even in the dim light, spoke up. His voice was calm but firm, cutting through the chaos. "We cannot hide forever," he said, his mandibles clicking rhythmically. "Kella's hatred will spread if we do not stop her, but neither can we rush blindly into battle. We must find balance." His words struck a chord with both humans and Zerithians alike. Slowly, a plan began to take shape. They would return to the settlement not to attack, but to expose Kella's tyranny and rally support from those who had grown disillusioned. With her leadership, it was risky, but it was also their best chance at creating lasting change. The journey back was tense. Every step felt heavier, weighed down by the knowledge that failure could mean disaster. Mira led the way once again, her senses sharp as she navigated the forest. Jamin walked beside her, leaning on the walking stick she had carved for him earlier. His injured leg had improved slightly, but it still ached with every movement. Despite the pain, he refused to slow the group down, drawing strength from the unity around him. When they reached the outskirts of the settlement, they paused to regroup. From their vantage point, they could see the bustling activity below. Humans and Zerithians going about their daily routines, oblivious to the storm brewing on the horizon. Kella's influence was evident in the rigid hierarchy and the wary glances exchanged between individuals. Fear ruled this place, and breaking its grip wouldn't be easy. Under cover of darkness, the group split into smaller teams, each tasked with spreading the message of resistance. Jamin and Mira stayed together, moving quietly through the shadows. They approached trusted humans first, sharing their story and urging them to question Kella's authority. Then, with Taro's guidance, they reached out to sympathetic Zir, who had long resented the oppressive traditions enforced by the ruling council. At first, progress was slow. Many were hesitant to speak out, afraid of retaliation. But as more people joined the cause, momentum began to build. Stories of Kella's cruelty spread like wildfire, igniting anger and defiance among those who had suffered in silence for too long. By the time the twin moons rose high in the sky, the settlement was alive with whispers of rebellion. Kayla, however, was no fool. She sensed the shift in the air and acted swiftly to quell the uprising. Gathering her loyal followers, she declared an emergency assembly, summoning everyone to the central arena. The atmosphere was tense as humans and Zerithians filed in, unsure of what awaited them. Kayla stood at the center, her silver exoskeleton gleaming under the artificial lights. Her presence commanded attention, but there was unease in her move. Flicker of doubt behind her cold gaze. J-Min and Mira arrived last, flanked by their allies. As they stepped into the arena, a hush fell over the crowd. All eyes turned to them, some filled with fear, others with hope. Kella's antennae twitched furiously as she locked onto Jamin, her mandibles clicking sharply. "You dare defy me," she spat, her voice cutting through the silence. "This human is nothing but a disruption, a stain on our society." Before Jamin could respond, Taro stepped forward, his golden exoskeleton catching the light. "Enough," he said firmly. "Your obsession with control has divided us. You claim to uphold tradition, yet you twist it to serve your own greed. Look around you, Kayla. Your followers are few, while those who oppose you grow stronger every day." The crowd murmured in agreement, emboldened by Taro's words. One by one, others began speaking out, humans and Zerithians alike, sharing their grievances and calling for change. Kayla tried to silence them, her voice rising in desperation, but it was no use. The tide had turned, and there was no stopping it. In the end, Kayla was stripped of her position on the ruling council, her crimes exposed for all to see. Though some called for harsh punishment, Jamin and Mira advocated for leniency. "She is a product of the same system that oppressed us all," Jamin said, his voice steady despite the weight of the moment. "Let her learn from her mistakes, not be consumed by them." The crowd hesitated, then nodded in agreement. Kayla, defeated and humiliated, retreated silently into the shadows, her reign of fear finally over. With Kayla gone, the settlement began to transform. Humans and Zerithians worked together to dismantle the old systems of oppression, replacing them with ones built on cooperation and mutual respect. The cultural exchange program expanded, allowing deeper understanding between the two species. And though challenges remained, the spirit of unity continued to grow. For Jamin and Mira, life became simpler, yet infinitely richer. No longer hunted or ostracized, they roamed the forests freely, continuing to explore the wonders of Zerith 7. Their bond deepened with each passing day, transcending language and species. To Jamin, Mira wasn't just a protector or companion, it was family. One evening, as they sat beneath the twin moons, Jamin leaned against Mira, feeling the warmth of her presence. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice filled with gratitude. "For everything," Mira hummed softly, her glowing exoskeleton pulsing gently in response. In that moment, surrounded by the beauty of the planet and the promise of a brighter future, they knew they had found something rare and precious, a connection that defied convention and proved love could conquer even the greatest divides. Under the watchful eyes of the twin moons, Jamin closed his eyes, content in the knowledge that no matter what lay ahead, he and Mira would face it together.